The Fourth Way by P.D. Ouspensky, Chapter 15. I have given you a general idea of the fundamental principles of the system, and up to now the center of gravity of our work, at least the practical work, was in ourselves. Today I want to show you a larger view. It is necessary to understand the idea of esotericism and to realize why certain people can understand this idea while other people cannot. We must know that esotericism means. No, we must know what esotericism means, what is included in it, what is excluded by it, and what is connected with it, and what can serve as a kind of test or touchstone for recognizing people who can understand it. For some people, the idea of esotericism appears absurd, impossible. For them, esotericism not only does it seem valuable, not only does not seem valuable, but does not even appear as possible truth. But for others, the idea of esotericism is necessary and important. The cause of this is to be found in the difference of method. All the ways of thinking can be divided into two categories: logical thinking and psychological thinking, and the capacity or incapacity to use the psychological method of thinking makes an enormous difference. The logical method is better than no method, but it's very limited. It is useful in law courts, but for understanding, it is not sufficient. For logical thinking, esotericism is impossible because it cannot be demonstrated or formulated. But for psychological thinking, which sees the psychological nature of things, the idea of esotericism follows from many facts that we can observe. So, the psychological method may bring one of the idea. So the psychological method may bring one to the idea of esotericism and may lead to proofs of its existence, certainly subjective proofs, but still proofs. And this, in its turn, may bring a man to the realization of the necessity of systems or teachings of an esoteric origin. It gives him the possibility of understanding the ideas of such systems and leads to the realization of the necessity of three lines of work and to an understanding of them. First, we must try to understand the difference between the logical and the psychological methods and to establish what each of them is. The psychological method cannot be dead, but we can find examples of it, of its application, of its way of working. We can see how the psychological method opens new ways of thinking, how by using it we begin to understand many things. When, by means of the psychological method, we have made a general survey of the teachings which prove to have an esoteric origin, we shall more or less know the qualities of teachings which can be called esoteric, and shall be able to think in a right way about the system and apply its principles in practice. The psychological method starts with two admissions. The first is that things have an inner meaning. The second is that things are connected, that they only appear to be separated. Things depend on one another. They stand in a certain relation to one another, whereas the logical method takes each thing separately. So, the psychological method studies everything first from the point of view of its inner meaning, and second, it finds similarities in the dissimilar. The basis of this method, and the chief difference from ordinary methods, is the realization of the relativity of mind, the understanding of the type and kind of mind used, and the realization that in one state of mind, things can be understood in one way and another in another way. For the logical mind, everything is certain and unique. But the psychological method shows that everything, every conclusion, every deduction is a mental picture and is merely the result of the working of our mind. For distinguishing, comparing, and finding the relative values of things and seeing which is higher and which is lower, you can start only with this realization of the possibility of different minds. When you compare ideas, let's say certain ideas of the New Testament, of the Upanishads, or of some attributed to the Pythagoras or Plato, with scientific ideas or philosophy, sometimes you can experience this realization of minds on different levels. What I want you to understand is that even using ordinary knowledge, you can come to the relative value of ideas and see that the starting point is the realization that our ordinary mind is not the only one that exists. And this is in italics, so I'm going to reread this. What I want you to understand is that even using ordinary knowledge, you can come to the relative value of ideas and see that the starting point is the realization that our ordinary mind is not the only one that exists. See if you can find some examples of the psychological method. If you cannot do so now, you must try to find them later. Examples of cases when you had new possibilities of understanding. Question: do you mean that one is not guided by the external similarity of facts? Answer: this is one aspect. If you meet with it, you will know what a psychological method is and what it is not. Question: is the psychological method the use of the intellectual part? Or, no, let me reread this. Is the psychological method the use of the intellectual part of the intellectual center? Answer: no, not quite. The more centers and the more parts of centers you use, the better the psychological method. It means using all the powers you have. Logical method means the use of only the mechanical part of the intellectual center. Question: and is the esoteric method the use of higher centers? No, it is the use of the system. You cannot use higher centers, but you can use the system. Question: is psychological thinking only possible when all our functions are working rightly? Answer: we must start as we are. We cannot wait till we change, because if we do, we will never change. And if we change mechanically, we change only for the worse. Question: what are the first things to learn in trying to think psychologically? I feel it is more than I can accomplish. Answer: when you say it is more than you can accomplish, you think about the completed process. And I speak about the process itself, about beginning to work. If you say this is beyond you, you can do nothing, and so naturally nothing happens. It is again this habit of thinking in absolutes. Question: what are the essential features of esotericism? Answer: it's difficult to speak about essential features because it depends on how you take this word. The word esoteric means inner. Esotericism includes in itself the idea of the existence of an inner circle of humanity. You remember how humanity was described as consisting of 4 circles: esoteric, mesoteric, exoteric, which constitute the inner circle, and the outer circle in which we live. The idea of esotericism implies transmission of knowledge. It presumes the existence of a group of people to whom a certain knowledge belongs. This must not be understood in some mystical way, but more definitely, concretely. There are a great many differences between the inner and outer circles. For instance, many things we find, or we want to find, or create can exist only in the inner circle. Such things as positive emotions, understanding between people, certain kinds of knowledge, all this belongs to the inner circle. I think this is sufficient for understanding the idea of the inner circle or esoteric circle. Question. I understand that the primary feature of esoteric knowledge is that it is hidden, and one would not likely find it. So how can we recognize esoteric knowledge or an esoteric school? Answer. We are studying a system which is supposed to be esoteric. So, with its help, we will begin to recognize it. And although esoteric knowledge is hidden from ordinary life, it can be found. It is not hidden absolutely, so that no one can find it. Otherwise, it would have no meaning. This would be contrary to its aims and would spoil the results of its existence. The only meaning of hidden knowledge is that it can be found. The important thing is to recognize it. With the help of these ideas, comparing what can be found in the ordinary intellectual way and what cannot, then comparing it with the system, we shall be able to establish with a certain degree of probability the level of the knowledge that we meet with. If we take history in the ordinary way as a series of separate events, we shall not find proofs of esotericism. For one thing will follow another, on the surface and without apparent connection. But if we know that things are connected and look for connections, we shall find them hidden beneath the surface. For instance, many big historical changes came apparently from nothing, with no antecedents, no origin. In ancient Greece, there was nothing on the surface to explain the 7th century BC. In the 8th and 9th century, there was apparently nothing leading up to it. There was no line of development. In the same way, Gothic art seemingly came out of nothing. It had no history. It appeared instantly. In prehistoric art, too, that is, in all that belongs to more than 10,000 years ago, there is nothing on the surface to explain the big Sphinx, for instance. It is both bigger in concept and higher in level, and so to speak more clever, though this is not the right word, than anything we know. Who made it? Why are such works of art found in the desert? And again, take literature, especially that of the East. We can find such things as the great Indian poems and the New Testament, which are of a higher level than anything else we know. There is nothing similar to them. There is nothing ordinary. Nothing ordinary can explain them. All these things are absolutely unique. If they are taken separately, and presupposing that they have no inner meaning, they cannot be explained. But if we try to use the psychological method, we shall find the connection. Try to think about esotericism, how it is possible, in which form it can exist, in which form it cannot exist. You can read the secret societies in the East or in Tibet, of the existence of the secret libraries, of groups of people living in hidden places and preserving ancient knowledge. This is a crude form of thinking. There is nothing impossible in the idea that there are groups of people of this kind. But the idea of esotericism is more subtle. It does not require secret societies. The idea of secret societies is a simplified form of thinking. It is quite possible that there are people here on earth who possess much greater knowledge than we do. But if they have this knowledge, they have no need of secret societies. They need not live in the mountains. They can live anywhere.